Hey guys, Pete here. So, a lot of people were asking about the timeline in Twin Peaks. More and more so, it seems that it's out of line. And because of this, in the last couple of videos, I had a lot of questions in the comments. So, I don't know exactly, and I would say that no one really knows exactly what, if anything, this non-linear narrative actually means. But it is clear that there are things that happen out of order. Luckily, Reddit user thecowjumpedovertheM has done a pretty good job of putting things together, and that's what I'm going to be using right now to go through things. If you're wondering how I came up with this, a lot of it has to do with date clues that we got, combining that with the clothes people are wearing and things like that. Now, I'll link to the original Reddit post in the description of this video, and you can see more about the methods there. It's not precise, and some things are best guesses, but if you read through the comments and you look at the different input that he's had from other people, it's a pretty good working outline. So I'm going to start from the top and work my way down, and then I'll add some other commentary at the end. So in our timeline, the very first thing that we know of that happened on a specific date is Bill Hastings and Ruth Davenport going to the zone for the second time. This would be when Ruth dies and when Briggs' head leaves his body and he goes up into the air saying, "Cooper, Cooper." According to what we know from his conversation with Tammy, this happened on the 22nd of September, and that's a Thursday. Somewhere around this same time, the events that happened in the Red Room may have gone down, but there's no saying for sure about that, so I'm largely going to leave that out of the timeline. We do know that there's the part where the doppelganger sends Cooper into non-existence, but he passes through the mob zone and all that other stuff, and we don't really know how time works in those places, so we all know that stuff happens, so let's just keep that in mind. The next day, Friday the 23rd of September, Davenport's body was found. We see Detective Mackley show up, and on that same day, Mr. C picks up Ray and Daria from Beulah's place. Also on that day is the first day that we saw New York City, where Sam's watching the glass box and Tracy comes to bring him coffee. The next day, Saturday the 24th, Bill Hastings is arrested. Mr. C has dinner with Ray and Daria, and then after that, we assume he went back and killed Hastings' wife. Also in New York that day, Tracy comes again with the coffee. Cooper flies through the box, and because no one's watching the outside, Sam brings Tracy in. They have an encounter and end up dead. The next day would be Sunday the 25th of September, and we see some things in Twin Peaks for the first time. See Dr. Jacoby at his compound there. This would be the day that Hawk opens up Laura's murder case again, like he gets the boxes out, and the day that Jerry comes to meet Ben and he first meets Beverly. On Sunday, the 25th, we also have our first Las Vegas interaction, and that's Duncan talking to his assistant, and we assume that he hired Lorraine at this point. Back in Buckhorn, Constance finds the ring. Mr. C kills Jack after he picks up the car. Ray ends up getting sent to jail. Mr. C goes back to the hotel, kills Daria, and prepares to go to Yankton himself. On Monday the 26th, Sheriff Truman comes into the office. We see Bobby cry when he sees Laura Palmer's picture on the table. Dr. Amp has his broadcast where we see Jerry watching it from the woods, and Wally Brando stops by the sheriff's department. In Las Vegas, the switch happens between Dougie and the original Agent Cooper. This is where he's with Jade in the house. We see him get saved from assassination attempt by reaching down for the key. Jade drops him off at the Silver Mustang Casino, and he becomes Mr. Jackpots. Later on that same evening, Janie E. gets introduced when Dougie's brought home. On the same day on the way to Yankton, Mr. C crashes after avoiding the switch in his car, and he gets sent to jail. Over in Philadelphia, Cole finds out what's going on, and he goes and meets Denise that very same day. On Tuesday, the 27th, we see the scene where Steven is out looking for a job, then they meet up in his car, and Becky gets high outside of the Double R. This would be where Jerry's lost and he calls Ben. That night we find out that Richard and Chad are working together, Deputy Chad, and that's when he would have scared those two girls. In Las Vegas, Lorraine sends the text. Cooper has his first morning where he has coffee again. Later in that same day, we see Jade mail the room key. Dougie Coop goes into the office for the first time. And then across town, his car explodes outside of the 119 girl's house. We see the Mitchums at the Silver Mustang, and they're upset because of the money that they lost to Dougie Coop. And at home, he brings his case files there, and he's working on them when he gets a little earful from Janie E. On that same day in Yankton, the FBI arrives at the jail, meets with Cooper. They have that Blue Rose conversation afterwards between Albert and Gordon, where he tells Albert to go find who we realize later is Diane. We see Mr. C on the same day, Evil Coop. He has Bob still inside him in the mirror. And then we see Evil Coop make his call where the cow jumped over the moon comes into it. On the very same evening, Albert goes to find Diane, and on that same day, we see Colonel Davis at the Pentagon send Knox over to Buckhorn, and as Cooper's making that phone call, Evil Cooper's making that phone call, we see that box thing in Buenos Aires turn into a pebble or whatever happened there. On the next day, Wednesday the 28th of September, we see Red. He does his magic trick for Richard. After he leaves, Richard runs over the kid, which Carl, Rod, and Miriam both witness. At the sheriff's department, Hawk finds the missing diary pages. Sheriff Truman calls up Doc Hayward. Over at the Great Northern, Ben and Beverly hear that hum, and before they leave, she hands the key that came in the mail for the room, and we see some more of Chad being a douchebag at the sheriff's department that day as well. In Las Vegas, the police show up to look into the car explosion. Duncan Todd sends the envelope over to hire Ike to kill Lorraine. Bushnell had looked over the case files again and understands what Dougie's trying to tell him. Later in that same day, Ike goes to kill Lorraine. Janie E. goes off to pay that gambling debt. The Fuscos are looking into what's going on, and they visit Dougie Coop at his office. And on the way out, Ike tries to kill Dougie Cooper, but is unsuccessful. That same day, Cynthia Knox arrives at Buckhorn. She sees the body, and she calls up Colonel Davis to tell him that the body is actually Major Briggs. Diane, Albert, and Gordon, along with Tammy, all show up in Yankton. They go in. Diane meets Evil Coop. Later in that same day, Evil Coop plans his escape by telling Warden Murphy what he knows about Mr. Strawberry and the other guy. Warden Murphy lets him and Ray out that night, and Ray shoots him. At the Pentagon, Colonel Davis calls the FBI after he hears back from Knox. On the 29th of September, the Thursday, Richard tries to kill Miriam, but she survives. We see Jerry arguing with his foot. We see Lucy here having her lunch as the guys go outside to try to open up the capsule from Major Briggs. They find the information there about the event at Jack Rabbit's Palace being 2 days away. And this is what grounds the date for a lot of these things, because we know that this happened on the 29th based on the fact that 10-1 and 10-2 were 2 days and 3 days away. Later that day, Sheriff Truman goes over to the Great Northern, Ben gives him the room key, and this is the evening where we see Bobby and Big Ed with Norma. It's also when we see Hawk and Truman back at the thing and the map. In Las Vegas on the same day, the Fuscos collect the prints up from Dougie Coop. Candy hits Rodney Mitchum in the face with the remote control. Duncan Todd gets the call from Mr. C, Evil Coop. Ike's arrested. Dougie Coop goes to have his doctor's appointment. Duncan Todd decides to have Tony Sinclair go and tell the Mitchums that it's all because of Dougie Coop. Janie and Dougie Coop sleep together, and the Mitchum brothers decide that they're gonna take care of Dougie Coop. In Buckhorn, the FBI gang arrives. We see that text message that we think is from Evil Coop to Diane. Tammy does her interview with Bill Hastings, and we get another reference to this same date, the 29th of September. Albert goes out with Constance. We see Cole drawing in his room, and we see the vision of Laura as Albert comes over to tell him about the text that Diane received. Somewhere outside of Yankton, Evil Coop arrives to where he meets Hutch and Chantel. He sends a text, and he makes a telephone call to Duncan Todd. On September 30th, we see Tread try to intercept a letter for Richard. At the same time, Richard robs his grandmother. Steven is missing, so that's when Becky tries to go over and shoot him. She finds out. After hearing about the robbery and Richard, Ben asks Beverly out, and we meet Audrey for the first time on the 30th, worrying about Billy. Back in Las Vegas, Bushnell gives Dougie the check to take out to the Mitchums. Bradley Mitchum has his dream. Mike diverts Dougie Coop to buy the cherry pie, and that's when the Mitchums and Dougie Coop become friends. On this same day out in South Dakota, the FBI goes to where the zone was. We see Diane watch. Hastings dies at the hands of a woodsman, and then they go back to the office where they have coffee and donuts, and Diane checks the coordinates on her phone at the bar. Now, the 1st of October we haven't seen in Twin Peaks yet. We're still waiting for that. But according to what everybody's put together, in Las Vegas, Sinclair realizes he has to kill Dougie. The Fuscos make a big mistake when they overlook the data that they get back on the fingerprints. Janie E gets her car, and Sonny Jim gets his gym set. And Tony Sinclair asks for the poison to try to kill Dougie Coop the next day. Again, this is still on the 1st. Tammy joins the Blue Rose Task Force. Gordon has the French girl over, and Albert comes in to report on the text messaging again. This will be the same day when Warden Murphy's killed, and Evil Coop shows up at the farm. While he's there, he kills Ray, and Ray ends up in the waiting room. Also, Richard shows up in Western Montana on that day to see it all go down. October 2nd, this is where it most likely makes sense that Becky was worried about Steven, where she gets that call at the Double R, where we see Shelley get the call from Becky and she tells her to come over and get pie. Back in Las Vegas, Anthony tries to poison Dougie Coop, but he doesn't go through with it, and then he confesses. And that, to this point, is all that we've seen. Now, I mentioned that some of it's gray, some of it's fuzzy, and some of it might just not be correct, but it is a good working outline, and a lot of it does come down to the 29th and how events are arranged around it. The Redditor thecowjumpedovertheM obviously did a lot of work and looked at all the clothing that our people are wearing in various scenes, and I can't verify all of it, but it makes a lot of sense when you look at it as a whole. There are some things that don't seem to fit at all. Indy's watch is a big one. A lot of people have pointed out that it says the 10th, and that just doesn't fit any way that you try to figure it out. The Becky stuff is a little bit sketchy to me. It doesn't make 100% sense, but this is all addressed in the original Reddit post, so you can check that stuff out there. I think the biggest thing about this that stood out to me was I had assumed that everything that's happened that we've seen on screen has been before the 1st of October because I expected a large coming together of all these characters around that date. So to figure out that, according to this, that the FBI won't be there on the 1st and Evil Coop won't be there on the 1st, that kind of blew my mind a little bit. So this took forever to go through, and I'll just leave it at that. Please like the video if you enjoyed it. Make sure you let me know in the comments what you think. Make sure you visit the actual thread and give some upvote love to One Flew Over the M, because that's a lot of work that's been going on for some time. Make sure you subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. Follow my social media accounts, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We can interact over there. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll talk to you soon.